Good morning, and welcome to another First Five. Today we find ourselves in Romans chapter 7, where Paul actually addresses an issue that many of us may have experienced, heard talked about, or maybe struggled with in our own theological understanding. I say all of that to say it's a very simple thing, and it's what happened with the law and our relationship to it when Jesus came and accomplished what he accomplished. Because Jesus came and gave us a new life that is possible to us. So in Romans chapter 7, verses 1 through 12, Paul does his best job and a really effective job in addressing this exact issue. So we'll start in verse 1 of chapter 7, where it says, "Do you not know, brothers, for I am speaking to men who know the law, that the law has authority over a man only as long as he lives. For example, by law, a married woman is bound to her husband as long as he is alive. But if her husband dies, she is released from the law of marriage. So then, if she marries another man while her husband is still alive, she is called an adulteress. But if her husband dies, she is released from that law and is not an adulteress, even though she marries another man. So, my brothers, you also died to the law through the body of Christ, that you might belong to another, to him who was raised from the dead, in order that we might bear fruit to God. For when we were controlled by the sinful nature, the sinful passions aroused by the law were at work in our bodies, so that we bore fruit for death. But now, by dying to what once bound us, we have been released from the law, so that we serve in the new way of the Spirit, and not in the old way of the written code." And I feel like I need to stop right here because, one, he uses this analogy talking about marriage and the fact that we died to the old way of living, just as a spouse may die, allowing the current spouse to then not by their law be an adulteress when they marry someone else, where if you would divorce and then get remarried, you would have been considered an adulteress. So what he does is he's now comparing that relationship, a marriage relationship, to how we were bound to the law, but then the law died to us through Jesus, and now we're married to the Spirit through what Jesus did. It's a lot of words, but as Paul is writing here, you may have begged the question, is he saying that the law is sin? Because he talks about no longer being bound by the law or its forces or things like that. He uses language that makes us wonder if the law is evil. So the first thing to understand right now is that we are now married to Christ and his Spirit. And that is the life we are to live. But what does that do to our relationship with the law? And if we continue in verse 7, we will find the answer. It says, "What shall we say then? Is the law sin? Certainly not. Indeed, I would not have known what sin was except through the law. For I would not have known what coveting really was if the law had not said, 'Do not covet.' But sin, seizing the opportunity afforded by the commandment, produced in me every kind of covetous desire. For apart from the law, sin is dead. Once I was alive apart from law, but when the commandment came, sin sprang to life and I died. I found that the very commandment that was intended to bring life actually brought death. For sin, seizing the opportunity afforded by the commandment, deceived me, and through the commandment put me to death. So then, the law is holy, and the commandment is holy, righteous, and good." So what exactly is Paul saying? Paul's saying the law is not bad. It's actually intended for good. It was intended to bring people closer to God and to keep us from the evils of this world. But instead what happened is through the law, I became even more educated on what sin actually was. Now, don't mishear me. This does not mean we shouldn't define what we shouldn't do so then I can get away with stuff. We're not just trying to be able to sin by not defining what sin is. But what he's saying is, just by the mere fact that we as humans, as his example, defined what coveting was, the sinful desire in our hearts takes that to another level, and now I actually desire to covet because I know of its power. But through Jesus, we actually died to that way of living and died to a more complex and simpler way of living, which is the Spirit resides in me, and through it, I am shaped to be more like Christ and love people with the love of Jesus. And through that, fully fulfill my call to both the law and to Jesus, to love others and to love God. So our relationship with the law changed. Jesus changed things. But if we live for him, we will live out of love and we will be no longer bound by the law that may produce sinful desire in us. I hope this was beneficial to you, and we'll see you next time for another Verse 5.